LiberalViewer presents.
So, welcome to the August 2nd edition of LiberalViewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup. Thanks for joining me. This weekend I have the 13 best, most newsworthy clips I picked out from the Sunday morning news analysis shows from the big five corporate outlets of ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News, the so-called corporate media here in the United States, for what should be a really informative, educational, fair use media criticism and political commentary show for you all tonight. Down in the video description, there's a link to my clip list of my 13 clips. You can read along on my cryptic notes that you may or may not be able to figure out. Also, the source of all the clips is down in the video description. I have two topics for you tonight. The first one is the title topic, Trump's Dangerous Lies. This week I show that Trump's lies are a danger to both the public health and to our democratic republic. I used the newsmaker clips and the news summaries to discuss the dangers of Trump's misinformation, disinformation, and dishonesty about coronavirus cases, hydroxychloroquine, the COVID-19 crisis in general, and also, that's the public health part, but in terms of our democratic republic, that's the legitimacy of mail-in ballots and the November 2020 election, and maybe we should delay the election, well, that will come up, you'll see in the newsmaker clips, or the news summary clips and the newsmaker clips. Also, I have a clip at the end on the topic of ACLU's fight. I'm going to talk about this new movie, The Fight, that not only, and I actually watched the movie The Fight. It's available streaming on Amazon, on Apple TV. There's actually a link down in the video description to the website for the film where there are like 6 or 7 sources, and if you buy it, it's like $12.99 to $14.99. I bought it for $14.99, and you can watch the whole movie. And if you use the link down in the video description, half the proceeds go to the ACLU. I really recommend the movie because it, like I was saying, it not only recapitulates some of the low points of the Trump administration you might have forgotten on immigration, voting rights, on transgender rights, on reproductive rights. There are like 4 different ACLU national lawyers profiled, and it's not just like this dry documentary about the fight against the Trump injustice, but there's like this real human drama that makes it, I thought, a really watchable movie. And when I get to that topic, I'll also talk about a discussion I had with a local ACLU lawyer that I'm going to premiere as a video tomorrow on my YouTube channel. It's actually not a live stream. It's a video that I recorded last Thursday because, I'm chair of the Sacramento area chapter of the ACLU, which is a volunteer group, and we hosted one of the staff attorneys locally. And because all of our meetings are Zoom meetings, thanks to COVID-19, I have video recordings of our meetings, and I thought that one might be worth sharing with everyone. And so I'm going to do that at 1 o'clock Monday, tomorrow, Pacific time. And I will, even though it starts with me here you'll recognize me wearing an ACLU t-shirt in front of my bookcase here, and I talk very briefly before I introduce the lawyer. I won't be doing it live. I will be premiering a live video, but I'll be down in the comment section talking about it with you and reading what you're saying about it if you want to join me tomorrow for that. And the last clip I'm going to show is actually from HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher. Bill Maher was back this week. He had an interview with Kerry Washington, the producer of the Fight movie about the ACLU. But first I want to start with a clip from Bill Maher's monologue as my political comedy clip, not because I thought any of his jokes were particularly funny, but I actually found it funny that he exemplified this criticism I've had of Bill Maher for quite a while about during COVID-19, he no longer does a live show on Friday. He pre-records it, and I think it turns out it's on Thursday based on things he said multiple times during the show. But it's almost like he's days and days behind, and I have to give him a little leeway because he was gone for a month or whatever. But in this clip, you'll see, one of the things I've said in previous live streams is Bill Maher always seems to be talking about my topic from last week. Well, in this clip, you'll see he actually says 100 days to the election, which was the topic of my video last week. And when he says it, even, if it's Thursday, whatever, he's like 4 days off at least, I think. And I will talk about that a little more after you watch this clip from Bill Maher's monologue with me over here.
Tell you, the left, you motherfuckers better start uniting because there's 100 days left until the election. Listen to this. Bernie Sanders, co-chair of his campaign, said the other day, he said, voting for Biden is like eating half a bowl of shit. What Chipotle calls the kids' menu. No, that's so not fair to Chipotle. Chipotle's healthier than fast food, even though I just said you eat bowls of shit. But you don't. We're mean to Chipotle. They shouldn't be.
So yeah, the monologue wasn't that great, and you saw one of the weird things he's doing since he doesn't have a live audience. He's like interspersing these audience reaction clips from old TV shows and movies that seemed to be. Was that like some martial arts movie? I couldn't even identify that clip. I identified several of the clips that he used, but it's like this weird like video laugh track that I don't find very enjoyable to watch. But like I said, I'm going to finish the show with a clip from Bill Maher's interview of Kerry Washington, which I will also have a criticism of him when I get to that. But now I want to get to the actual news clips, starting, of course, as usual, with the NBC News Meet the Press news summary, which is the longest and most extensive news summary about Trump's failures on, his misinformation and failures on COVID-19, his weird behavior. It's like this week has been a month of Trump scandals. I took the thumbnail from Tuesday when he was like saying how he's always doing what Anthony Fauci says, but everyone loves Fauci and everyone hates him. It must be his personality. It's, it was the most petulant thing, that happened that day maybe in the Trump administration, because it's like day after day, I hope this guy's losing. I hope he's not going to be reelected, but I'll talk about that more. Let me just look at my notes here real quick. And the other thing that's what I was saying. So many things happened this week. Trump also retweeted this misinformation from this doctor who also believes that gynecological problems are caused by having sex with demons in your sleep. The demon semen woman, that's also included in the NBC News Meet the Press introduction from Chuck Todd. Then he goes to the summary package, as usual, not necessarily just saying that Chuck Todd is doing a good job, because I know there are all those Chuck Todd haters out there, but this is NBC and the producers putting together a summary of the news from the week, which is almost 4.5 minutes long, and I think gives you a better, I used to watch these Sunday morning news analysis shows before there was cable news, and this is like how you found out what happened during the week. So maybe I'm biased because I'm so old that I remember the pre-cable news days when the news cycle was so much slower, and this is when we found out what happened, and Chuck Todd's going to tell us in his live introduction and his pre-recorded package that I will talk about with you after we watch it together over here.
Good Sunday morning. So much for that new tone. This past week, President Trump retweeted a video of a doctor who said masks were unnecessary. Hydroxychloroquine is a cure for COVID-19, and that diseases are caused by dreams of sex with demons. And meanwhile, the number of deaths from COVID-19 passed 150,000. 9 states set one-day records for COVID cases, while 11 set single-day records for deaths. Among those deaths was former Republican presidential candidate Herman Cain. Cain was diagnosed shortly after attending the president's rally in Tulsa. We learned that economic output fell in the last quarter by the largest amount since records have been kept, at an annualized rate of 32.9%. And that was even before extra unemployment benefits for tens of millions of Americans ran out on Friday. And finally, President Trump made the most un-American and undemocratic of suggestions, proposing to delay the election, insisting again, without evidence, that mail-in voting will result in a fraudulent outcome. And remember, all of this was just this past week. Mr. Trump's delay the election gambit had the scent of a president who was seeking a distraction from the terrible economic news, a president whose desperation makes him even more unpredictable. In short, a president who expects to lose. Ultimately, Mr. Trump increasingly looks like a man who believes that the more the virus spins out of control, the more his presidency does too.
This is going to be the greatest election disaster in history.
President Trump escalating his efforts to cast doubt on the integrity of the November election, which polls currently suggest he is losing.
Do I want to see a date change? No, but I don't want to see a crooked election. This election will be the most rigged election in history if that happens.
Renewing his attacks on mail-in voting despite no evidence it leads to voter fraud, and suggesting a delay which he has no constitutional authority to enact.
This is not something that the president can do.
Republicans race to distance themselves.
Never in the history of the country, through wars, depressions, and the Civil War, have we ever not had a federally scheduled election on time. And we'll find a way to do that again this November 3rd.
Never in the history of the federal elections have we ever not held an election, and we should go forward with our election.
It's just the latest attempt by the president to sow seeds of doubt about the coming election results. With the coronavirus surging and death tolls up more than 20% in 30 states over the past 2 weeks, the CDC is now projecting the U.S. death toll could hit 182,000 in just 3 more weeks. And the president's testing czar is conceding a national lag in testing.
Would it be possible for our nation to have results for all COVID tests completed and returned within 48 and 72 hours?
It is not a possible benchmark we can achieve today, given the demand and the supply. It is absolutely a benchmark we can achieve moving forward.
It is an issue if you can't get it within a 24 to 48-hour period.
In Florida, which marked its 4th straight day of record deaths on Friday, the president simply ignored the facts.
I think we're doing really a fantastic job.
Instead, trying to create fear of a Democratic presidency.
If Joe Biden is elected president, the chaos and bloodshed will spread to every community in our land.
Some top Trump advisors believe the president's playbook isn't working and are finding it hard to keep him on message. Earlier this week, he retweeted this video featuring doctors insisting masks don't work, but hydroxychloroquine does.
You don't need mask. There is a cure.
They're very respected doctors. There was a woman who was spectacular in her statements about it.
Hydroxychloroquine is not effective in the treatment of coronavirus disease or COVID-19.
And the president continues to share misinformation, tweeting again on Friday, if we had no testing or bad testing, we would show very few cases.
If you do more testing, you're going to see more cases. Okay. But the increases that we're seeing are real increasing in cases, as also reflected by increasing in hospitalization and increasing in deaths.
And joining me now is the Assistant Secretary of Health. It's Admiral Brett Jawah. He is also a member of the White House Coronavirus Task Force.
Admiral and Dr. Brett Giroir, or however you pronounce his last name. I'm going to show Chuck Todd. For the Chuck Todd haters out there in clip 9, you're going to see Chuck Todd cross-examine Admiral Giroir and get him to say we should get past hydroxychloroquine. Just like Anthony Fauci said, there's no controlled, peer-reviewed, empirical evidence that shows that hydroxychloroquine is, well, certainly not the cure. You saw that Trump spread that misinformation from that one doctor that was taken down by Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. I don't know why there are all these weird conspiracy theories. Don't wear a mask. Hydroxychloroquine is a cure. And that's coming out of the White House. That's exactly why I'm talking about Trump's dangerous lies. And just in the NBC News Meet the Press news summary there, I think you saw the hydroxychloroquine thing I was talking about. You saw the thing about the coronavirus cases being caused by the testing. But how long has Trump been saying that ridiculous talking point? Like, that's going to save him and get him reelected. So you saw all that in the news summary. The ABC News This Week with George Stephanopoulos news summary. It's actually Martha Raddatz, the co-host this week, and you'll see her also talking about us being in the throes of a pandemic, talking about 154,000 dead Americans. Also, the thing I was talking about last week, I spent most of my time talking about this deal that Congress was trying to work out, and it looks like they're not even going to get a deal. And so unemployment insurance, the supplements, the $600 a week supplement that was kind of keeping our economy afloat, that's expired. The eviction moratorium, the federal one that applied to, I think it's like 30-something% of rental units in the United States, that expired. So we're looking at the economic crisis getting worse. And I'm not going to really talk that much about the congressional negotiations because not that much has happened since I talked about it last week. And so the topic this week is Trump's dangerous lies, which I think you'll also see come up in Martha Raddatz's news summary, about 25% of the length of the one you saw from Meet the Press, but also good over in this clip.
Good morning and welcome to This Week. The country remains deep in the throes of a pandemic, closing out the worst month for cases and hospitalizations so far, and marking a grim milestone, more than 154,000 lives lost. The CDC warning it will likely only get worse in the coming weeks. This devastating reality, compounded by economic uncertainty, after enhanced unemployment benefits expired Friday, some 30 million Americans are facing a perilous financial cliff. That $600 means money for rent, to put food on the table, to make ends meet. Democratic leaders and senior Trump administration officials met Saturday, calling it a productive meeting, but each side says there is still work to be done. Americans caught in the middle, waiting for a resolution. We will dive into all of that this morning. Top negotiators, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin join us exclusively. And we begin with Speaker Pelosi. Speaker, both sides.
And I will have a Speaker Pelosi clip coming up. That's clip 7. I will spare you the Steve Mnuchin clip. I think I gave you more Steve Mnuchin than anyone should have to bear in last week's video. If you really want to watch Steve Mnuchin, you can. This is supposedly a playlist, so you should be able to see last week's video, though YouTube stopped really doing that a long time ago. Rarely do my playlist show last week's video as the next selection, but whatever, that's something you don't even care about. But I actually, in the title of my video, I put the two newsmaker names as Nancy Pelosi and Deborah Birx, because in clip 7 and clip 8, you'll see Nancy Pelosi versus Deborah Birx on whether Trump is spreading misinformation, whether Nancy Pelosi has lost confidence, not just in Donald Trump, of course, but in Dr. Deborah Birx. But before I get to that newsmaker battle that I put in the title of my video this week, I have two more news summaries, the CBS News Face the Nation one and the Fox News Sunday one. CBS News Face the Nation, I thought, did a great job. In fact, this is about 3.5 minutes. I didn't want to go and show the second part where they cover what's happening in the world, but I'll let it play all the way till they start talking about that, because they talk about how the countries with the worst record are the United States, Brazil, Russia, and India. And the part of the clip I'm not going to show is where they're saying that India is having like 50,000 new cases a day and climbing, and they're on track to actually have a worse coronavirus outbreak than the United States, because of course India has a lot more people, like triple the people of the United States. So that could be really bad for the world, for number of deaths. India in general does not have the healthcare system of the United States. Not that the United States has the best healthcare system in the world, but anyway, that's what you'll see at the very end of this clip. But anyway, I've already over-introduced the CBS News Face the Nation news summary. John Dickerson is in for Margaret Brennan, and then it goes to Mark Strassman, still in Atlanta. And remember, a few weeks ago, we found out that he's stranded in Atlanta until someone from the CDC will give him an interview. Like, they ask every week and they never give it to him, and that's why he's waiting there. Which and then they also have hurricane coverage, which you won't see in any of the other news summaries, and I'll talk about that with you a little more after we watch the CBS News Face the Nation news summary with John Dickerson and Mark Strassman this morning over here.
Good morning and welcome to Face the Nation. Margaret is off this week. 6 months into the pandemic, the coronavirus is only getting worse. In July alone, nearly 2 million cases were reported in the U.S., which is over 1 million more than the previous record set during the month of April. And as we head into August, deaths are increasing in 16 states. Complicating the response is a tropical storm that's off the coast of Florida this morning. Our coverage begins with CBS News national correspondent Mark Strassman in Atlanta.
The virus and the storm sounds like cheap fiction. But this weekend, both threats stalk states like Florida, Georgia, the Carolinas, and up to Virginia. A rising storm offshore, rising COVID rates inland. Isaias forced many Florida testing sites to close. North Carolina evacuees were warned to avoid shelters. Too risky.
We can keep people safe from the storm while at the same time trying to avoid making the pandemic worse.
COVID keeps mocking its deniers and menacing America. With the virus dug in and cases ballooning, brace yourself for another rough week. In cities like Houston, COVID is out of control.
In the last 3 days, more people have been reported testing positive than in the entire month of May combined.
Cases are on the rise in 28 states and Washington, D.C. California became the first state to top 500,000 cases. Nationally, the virus has killed more than 1,000 people for 6 straight days. By August 22nd, the CDC predicts the weekly death toll could reach 11,000. Jefferson City, Georgia, went back to school on Friday. Masks are recommended, not mandatory.
So I said, now you guys remember what all the rules are, right? And they said wear a mask, wash our hands all the time.
School has already begun in 5 states with mostly virtual classrooms. But many parents demand to have the choice, despite this virus still in search of a vaccine.
There is no way under the sun I would allow even my child to go to a school if these numbers are the same or greater by the end of August.
Colleges hemorrhaging money face the same dilemma. At USC, fall semester doesn't start for 3 weeks, but at least 40 people have already tested positive on Fraternity Row.
It just took one person, and the next thing you know, like, everyone had it.
America is starving for distractions. Baseball's back, but for how long? Here in Atlanta, the Braves play the Mets this afternoon, but COVID outbreaks have postponed 3 other Sunday games. So far, more than 100 players have tested positive. Barely a week after baseball's shrunken season began, its commissioner, alarmed, is already threatening to shut it down. John?
Mark Strassman, thank you. The total number of COVID-19 cases worldwide stands at 17.8 million, with the highest case totals outside the U.S. in Brazil, India, and Russia. CBS News senior foreign correspondent Elizabeth Palmer reports from London. Liz?
Good morning.
And if you want to see that Elizabeth Palmer report, click on the CBS News Face the Nation link down in the video description, which goes to the CBS News Face the Nation YouTube channel, where actually I think the entire show pretty much is split up into individual video, like 5 or 6 different clips where you can click on Elizabeth Palmer's report, hear about Brazil, Russia, and India. And like I said, India is looking like it could be the big COVID-19 loser, on, even worse than the United States because of more people and exponential spread at the moment, apparently. But I actually realized I showed that clip out of order. That was a longer, meatier description of the COVID-19 problem from CBS News' Face the Nation. But I also, before that, I meant to show the CNN State of the Union news summary, where Dana Bash was in for Jake Tapper this week, saying the State of the Union this week is desperate and frustrated because of the COVID-19 cases, the 154,000 deaths, and July is, not only the deaths, but the COVID-19 problem is out of control with no path to figure out how to get it under control. We're looking at one of the worst months in July, and there's also economic devastation, all described in... This is kind of similar to the ABC News This Week with George Stephanopoulos news summary, just like a minute and 17 seconds that gives you the highlights of the low points of last week over here.
Hello, I'm Dana Bash in for Jake Tapper in Washington, where the state of our union is desperate and frustrated. Today, there are more than 4.6 million coronavirus cases in the U.S. and more than 154,000 Americans dead. Despite months of previously unimaginable deaths, job losses, and restrictions to daily life, it is clear that America still does not have COVID-19 under control, and there is no apparent path to get there. July marked the highest month of new COVID-19 cases, and the CDC now is projecting that 20,000 more Americans could die from COVID-19 in the next 21 days. Officials now are warning about a dangerous resurgence of cases in states across the Midwest that had gotten the virus under control. As some public health officials are now calling for another lockdown, President Trump continues to promote false information, blaming tests for the nation's severe outbreak. All this as millions of Americans are facing a dire new economic reality now that an extra $600 unemployment benefit has run out, and leaders in Washington have been unable to make a deal to restore any of it. I want to begin, though, with the White House Coronavirus Response Coordinator, Dr. Deborah Birx. Dr. Birx, thank you.
And like I said, I will have a Deborah Birx clip. That's clip number 8, it's the Nancy Pelosi versus Deborah Birx clip 7 versus clip 8 that I will get to after I show clip 6, which is the final news summary, Fox News Sunday, which, as usual, was definitely skewed towards Trump. As I try to point out every week, if you read this book over here, The Loudest Voice in the Room by Gabriel Sherman, you'll find out Fox News was actually created to be a propaganda arm of the Republican Party. And I don't know, there's some talk, one of the Murdoch brothers resigned from Fox News, but he was like the more moderate one. I don't know if Fox News is becoming like a Trump diehard or a channel as Trump TV, or if maybe they're going to start pivoting to a post-Trump world like some Republicans are planning to do, because it looks like Trump's going to lose, assuming he actually capitulates once he loses. But in this Fox News Sunday news summary, you won't hear a lot about COVID-19, not the number of deaths, not the number of cases, not the number of hospitalizations. It's more about Trump distracted us by talking about how there were, how he might delay the election. You'll see Chris Wallace talk about that. And, oh, you know, one thing you saw in that last news summary, or I think it was actually the Face of the Nation one, is the gross domestic product dropped. It was like 9.5% in the second quarter, like a 32.9% annualized. I said that last week in my live stream, if you watched, that the GDP numbers were going to come out and the economy was going to drop by about, the growth was going to drop by about a third, and that 32.9% annualized drop, that's pretty much what I said last week. And instead, you'll see on Fox News, they sort of talk about the economic thing, but they mostly talk about the election thing and the dispute in Congress. Not much about all the people who are dying and how things are basically in a really bad place. But I will talk about that with you a little more after we watch that 2.5-minute news summary from Chris Wallace and then Mark Meredith on Fox News Sunday this morning over here.
And hello again from Fox News in Washington. President Trump raised the possibility of delaying the November election this week, something he does not have the power to do. But it was a way to dramatize his continuing campaign against mass mail-in voting. Meanwhile, Joe Biden continues to lead in most of the key battleground states, and he's getting closer to picking his running mate. But top Democrats say not to expect an announcement for another week to build up excitement for the party's convention. In a moment, we'll speak with two of the frontrunners on the Biden shortlist, Senator Tammy Duckworth and Congresswoman Karen Bass. But first, let's bring in Mark Meredith with the latest on weekend talks between the White House and Democrats on the next round of coronavirus relief. Mark.
Chris, the White House and Congress remain split over how much money to spend to keep the American economy afloat. But leaders from both parties insist they are making progress and will get back to negotiating this week.
There's still a lot of work to do.
While millions of Americans struggle to make ends meet, the battle in Washington is over who should get help.
Addressing the enhanced unemployment and eviction protection still needs to be the very top priority.
People need resources in order to meet the needs of their families.
Democrats want to restart enhanced unemployment insurance, giving Americans $600 a week on top of state jobless benefits. The White House appears willing to extend payouts in smaller amounts, but it's unclear for how long. Meantime, President Trump is doubling down on the comments he first made on Fox News Sunday 2 weeks ago, insisting he has a new health care plan.
I'll be signing it sometime very soon. It might be Sunday, but it's going to be very soon.
No details have been released, neither have the president's plans for TikTok. The president threatened to ban the Chinese-owned social media app over privacy concerns, but the company is vowing to stay on Americans' phones by offering to divest its services to a new owner. The president continues to question if mail-in voting could lead to major fraud come November. The White House created quite a bit of an uproar last week by suggesting that the election could be delayed. But leaders from both parties, they pushed back instantly, Chris, saying delays were not an option. Chris?
Mark Meredith reporting from the White House. Mark, thank you. And joining us now, one of the leading contenders to run.
And I showed a Tammy Duckworth clip a few weeks ago. I'm not going to do any of the possible vice presidential candidate clips, although Tammy Duckworth and Karen Bass was on multiple shows this morning, and some say Biden's going to choose his vice president before next Sunday. So maybe I can cover that next Sunday. That's why I didn't take that clip, but that was the last of the news summaries, and I think you can let me know what you think if that is more Trump TV, Republican propaganda, as outlined by the loudest voice in the room, by Gabriel Sherman, like I was talking about, compared to the other four news summaries. Doesn't, downplaying COVID-19, not really talking about who's to blame. Last week I talked about how the Democrats passed the HEROES Act. It was 2.5 months ago at this point, and the Republicans still haven't really coalesced on around a counteroffer, and that's one of the reasons why it's been so delayed. And that was not very apparent from the Fox News summary, even though they spent a lot of time covering that issue. But now I want to move on to my newsmaker clips. The first two are the ones I promised: Nancy Pelosi versus Deborah Birx, promised in the title of my video. First, I'm going to show Nancy Pelosi over on ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos talking to Martha Raddatz about the two ways I've been saying that Trump's lies are dangerous. I said his lies are dangerous to the public health and to our democratic republic. They're dangerous to the public health in terms of his lies about COVID-19, and our democratic republic in terms of his lies about the legitimacy of the election and mail-in ballots. And Nancy Pelosi covers both those topics, talking to Martha Raddatz. First, you'll see Martha Raddatz asking about a Politico story that she questioned the credibility of Deborah Birx, and Nancy Pelosi says, well, she's a mouthpiece for Trump, and Trump is totally dishonest, basically, and then talks about the election. And I think I've over-introduced this clip since it's less than 2 minutes long, and I've talked about it for at least 2 minutes, so now I will talk about it with you a little more after we watch that first newsmaker clip together over here.
Be very careful with
Madam
our
Speaker,
children.
I want to ask you, we just have a couple of minutes here. Politico reported that in a closed meeting on Friday, you accused Dr. Deborah Birx of the coronavirus task force of spreading disinformation about the pandemic. Is that true? And do you have confidence in her?
I think the president is spreading disinformation about the virus, and she is his appointee. So I don't have confidence there, no.
And I want to ask you quickly about election security. Yes. President Trump suggested that November's election could be delayed over concerns about mail-in voting. No. That drew widespread criticism, of course. But what are your concerns come November?
Well, I'm a former chair of the California Democratic Party, and I know the Republicans know how to do mail-in voting. They always would prevail when the mail-in votes came in. But I think it's important for you to know, Martha, that in the most recent election we had in California, spring special election, that the president's son, Donald Trump Jr., and his daughter-in-law both did robos and ads saying to Republicans, mail in your ballot. It's important for you to mail in your ballot. So they were talking about mail-in voting at this most recent election. I think that the president, I don't think it benefits one party or another, but I think it is essential from a health reason because we want to keep people at home to vote without having them all collect on Election Day. But if they do want to vote in person, that we have sufficient spacing and all the rest so that it's not a risk to their health. People should not have to choose between their health and their vote.
Okay,
and that's very important.
Thank you very much for joining us this morning.
Thank you, Martha.
Speaker.
Wonderful to be with you always. Thank you.
So, like I said, before I showed the clip, you saw Nancy Pelosi there covering my two big dangerous lie topics regarding Donald Trump, both on the coronavirus and on our democratic republic in terms of the integrity of mail-in ballots and whether he's going to delay the election date. And that was something you don't want to see. But this next clip is not very long. It's Deborah Birx over on CNN's State of the Union talking to Dana Bash, where Dana asked Deborah Birx about what you saw Nancy Pelosi say there, that she doesn't have confidence in Deborah Birx as a Trump spokesperson. And Deborah Birx's answer here kind of reminds me of the whole Ukraine scandal where Trump was, it turned out on a phone call when Trump was asked about the Ukraine thing, he said, no quid pro quo, even though no one ever asked him if there was a quid pro quo in that phone call. Like, you're like denying something someone never even accused you of. And Deborah Birx kind of does that in this next clip where she goes into this whole New York Times story. I actually put a link to that story here in the video description. It's titled Inside Trump's Failure, the Rush to Abandon Leadership Role on the Virus. And it basically shows how various people in the White House were giving like rosy scenarios, were underplaying the impact of the coronavirus. You'll see Deborah Birx quotes them saying that she was Pollyannish, and methinks the lady doth protest too much, I guess, is the point I'm trying to make regarding this Deborah Birx clip that I will talk about with you a little more after we watch it together over here.
Ask you before we go, the House Speaker on another network just said that she does not have confidence in either the president or you, Dr. Birx. Do you want to respond?
I have tremendous respect for the Speaker. And I have tremendous respect for her long dedication to the American people. And I think It was unfortunate that New York Times wrote this article without speaking to me. I could have brought forth the data. I provide data every single day with an analysis. The day that they're talking about that I was, quote, Pollyannish, it said there was improvement in the New York Metro, but ongoing cases in Boston and Chicago, a new outbreak in Houston in full logarithmic spread, and new concerning outbreaks in Baltimore, New Haven, and Washington, D.C. This was not a Pollyannish view. I have never been called Pollyannish or non-scientific or non-data driven. And I will stake my 40-year career on those fundamental principles of utilizing data to really implement better programs to save more lives.
Dr. Birx, thank you so much for joining me this morning. I appreciate it.
And she did kind of stake her 40-year career on being a mouthpiece for Donald Trump in a way that has not always been honest, and she's been kind of Trumpian occasionally. If you watched all the Deborah Birx clips that I've shown in her attacks on the media and the press, and we all know the press is not perfect, certainly not the New York Times, but like I said, I thought she bringing up what the New York Times reported when no one had even really accused her of that. This article's from like 10 days ago, like 2 weeks ago, I think. What is it? What's the date on there? It's well, I think it's like July 18th. No, I have it in my video description. Let's see, it's the July 20. No, that's not even the right. Why do I have person-woman camera interview still in July 18th? Yeah, I was right. Did I just get another super chat contribution? Before I get to I have like 2 super chat contributions from Sexy Bob along the way, and 2 from Sinful Solutions. Matthew, since he wasn't here for the live show last week, gave me a super chat contribution. That's Debatable with Ollie, Lulu Girl, Andy M. And then I just got this Iranian Kiddo XXX. That isn't not someone I've seen before, but I appreciate all those super chat contributions along the way, since the ad revenue I get from my YouTube videos, oftentimes they're not monetized till most people have watched them and whatever. I don't want to go into all that, but I just noticed that while I was talking that I had all these super chat contributions for the live shows. That's one of the reasons I do this show as a live stream, where, you know, my speaking is not as polished as if I wrote a script and recorded a video, but the thing is, I'm reporting on the corporate news outlet news analysis programs from Sunday morning. I'm doing it as fast as I can. I'm spending 8 to 10 hours every Sunday for the last 380 Sundays. More than 7 years I've been doing this. And 380 is over 365, so that means if you put all the Sundays I've done in a row, it would take me more than a year to finish all those Sundays. So that's why I appreciate all the people who support me putting this time in every Sunday, day, week after week, year after year. You get the picture. But anyway, I now have 3 people trying to justify what the Trump administration has done. 2 on COVID-19, 1 on what they've done with slowing down the postal system so we don't trust mail-in ballots. That's Admiral Giroir, Mark Meadows, the chief of staff for President Trump, and then Jason Miller, a Trump campaign spokesman. Those are the next 3 clips I'm going to show you in succession. First, I told you earlier that Chuck Todd at least got Admiral Giroir, the assistant HHS secretary, to say that we need to move past hydroxychloroquine. No matter what Trump retweeted this week, some pediatrician saying that it was a cure. There's no evidence no evidence. The CDC said no evidence. And here you have one of Trump's main task force leaders saying the same thing in response to questioning from Chuck Todd on on NBC's Meet the Press this morning over here.
Look, I know you're not a political person, but the president continues to advocate for hydroxychloroquine. Is that a danger to public health?
So from a public health standpoint, at first, hydroxychloroquine looked very promising. There were not the definitive studies. At this point in time, there's been 5 randomized placebo-controlled trials that do not show any benefit to hydroxychloroquine. So at this point in time, we don't recommend that as a treatment. There's no evidence to show that it is. But on the other hand, we have remdesivir. We have steroids, which reduces mortality by 30%. We still don't know about immune plasma, but it has worked in many other circumstances. There are many trials, and you heard that national call for that. And a vaccine looks very promising as well. So we have many things that do work. Right now, hydroxychloroquine, I can't recommend that.
Now, I was just going to say, are you concerned, though, that because of this mixed messaging, that it's going to continue to sort of create this fog, if you will, about treatments and misuse of this drug? So hydroxychloroquine needs to be prescribed by a physician. There may be circumstances, I don't know what they are, where a physician may prescribe it for an individual, but I think most physicians and prescribers are evidence-based and they're not influenced by whatever is on Twitter or anything else. And the evidence just doesn't show that hydroxychloroquine is effective right now. I think we need to move on from that and talk about what is effective, both from a public health standpoint. I told you, the masks, the crowds, wash your hands, right. Avoid indoor spaces. And for treatments, we know that if you get COVID now, your chances of dying are incredibly less than they were in April because our healthcare providers know how to treat it better. We have effective therapies like remdesivir and steroids, promising therapies like immune plasma, and a vaccine really on the horizon. Admiral Jawah, I have to end it there. I appreciate you coming on.
Admiral Giroir, Dr. Giroir, I'm sorry I multiply mispronounced his name, but he's a top member of the Trump task force, and it seemed like he was trying to do like what they call the compliment sandwich. When you're like trying to give someone negative feedback, you're supposed to like say something complimentary, then say the negative thing, and then say something complimentary. So like he did say in there that Trump should stop talking, we got to move on from hydroxychloroquine. And this is in a week when Trump retweeted that pediatrician saying that it was a cure when there's no evidence it even helps. But he said, but even though, we got to move on from hydroxychloroquine, all these good things are happening on therapeutics and maybe a vaccine, and we lower death rate, although that might be changing as we go from, it's more cases, more hospitalizations, more ICU admittances, and then more deaths. And I don't know exactly where we are on that curve, but things aren't looking that great, as not all the happy talk you just heard from the Admiral there. But the next Trump administration official I want to show you trying to justify Trump's misinformation and how he's contradicting his public health officials is his new chief of staff, Mark Meadows, who used to be a Freedom Caucus right-wing partisan tool in the Congress. And as I said last week when I had a clip from him, he's still a right-wing partisan tool. And you'll see him answering John Dickerson's questions on CBS News' Face the Nation, or I should say not answering, more like dodging the premise of the question that Trump is putting forth misinformation. How can you say that's not happening? But that's basically, if you look at my notes, it's like the questioning from John Dickerson gets no, dodge. He refuses to even accept the premise that Trump's dangerous lies are hurting the public health, even though that's what's happening, as I will talk about with you a little more after we watch that clip from CBS News' Face the Nation, guest hosted by the former host John Dickerson over here.
Let me ask you about the COVID numbers this week. We're 7 months into this pandemic. The numbers reached 150,000 deaths. When we look at what the president says this week, he seems to be rowing in the opposite direction of his health experts. He's criticizing and contradicting Dr. Fauci on Twitter. The president is talking about hydroxychloroquine. None of his public health officials are talking about that issue, and yet they're trying to get a message out into the country. Who has a better megaphone than the president? Why is his message on this so different than what his public health officials? Shouldn't they be in line?
Well, I don't think that they're different than the public health officials, and I'll address the thing with Dr. Fauci here in just a second. But I can tell you the president has been very serious. He's gone back to daily briefings to try to keep the American people informed. I think, in fact, it was his words, not mine, that suggested that, there are some critical days ahead, some very concerning days ahead as we continue to test more and more. But when you mentioned Dr. Fauci, I think his pushback on that was where Dr. Fauci talked about 50% shutdown versus 95. No. There is no data that would suggest that's correct. In fact, I would say there's data just the opposite of that. When we shut down, we actually shut down more than 50% of the country to try to contain that. But here's what we do know. We continue to test more than any country in the world. In fact, we test more than the 8 countries below us and trying to do that. So here's what we have to do.
But Mr. Meadows, here's the point. Testing is important. Testing has to take place. The president being in a debate with Dr. Fauci doesn't get people focused on what you listen to all of his public health experts saying on all the other channels. The president's got his channel. On the other channels, you have health officials telling people wear masks.
I'm here with you this morning.
I know,
talking to your viewers to talk about the facts, and the facts are this: is as we continue to test, we're continuing to look at areas that we need to be concerned about: nursing homes, long-term care, those that have 3 comorbidities. We need to make sure that we focus there. We're finding more and more asymptomatic people, but the real result is we're not going to test our way out of this. We've got to get a therapeutic. We've got to make sure that we have a treatment, and we're making great progress.
But there is no better megaphone in the country than the president, and the things he's concerned about don't seem to be the same things his public health officials are concerned about. In a war, if this is a war as the president says, to have the commander-in-chief on a different channel than his generals seems to me to be a bad idea. Let me ask you this question.
Well, John, I don't agree with your characterization there. I can tell you that daily, in fact, many times, multiple times a day, he is checking in with not only the doctors, but myself and others. What are we doing with therapeutics? We've got to give hope to the American people. Hopefully we will be able to not only have a vaccine, but have therapeutics for those who get this where it's not a death sentence. And we're making great progress. We've already seen that with convalescent plasma. Hopefully some good announcement in the coming days there.
All right, we'll move on now to the next question. Did the president ask you or anybody in the administration to look into the idea of
delaying the election is the next question there, by the way. If you click down on the CBS News Face the Nation link in the video description, you can watch the entire Mark Meadows interview from John Dickerson on the CBS News Face the Nation YouTube channel that where he asks about delaying the election. That's actually the sort of the topic of the next clip I'm going to show you, but and the clip after that, the James Clyburn clip, definitely. But like I said before I showed that clip, I think Mark Meadows just denied the premise, never really answered the question about Trump's misinformation being, I thought John Dickerson put it really well. He's a wartime president who's saying something completely different from his generals. That's got to harm the war effort as such, the war against the coronavirus. And anyway, I pretty much mentioned that before I showed the clip. And then this next clip, the final Trump administration official, this is Jason Miller, a campaign spokesperson, talking about something that could be a real disaster for the election. Not just Trump claiming that we should delay the election, but that There's all this reporting about how Trump put this new postmaster general into the post office, and they're delaying the mail. And Chris Wallace, to his credit, commits some journalism on Fox News, which not quite a sin if you read this book, The Loudest Voice in the Room. You know, some journalism does occasionally happen on Fox News, even though it's a Republican propaganda outlet. And in this clip, you'll see Chris Wallace ask a Trump campaign spokesperson about how they're slowing down the mail for there are some states where the mail-in ballots have to be received by Election Day. Here in California, I think it's postmark +3, +4. I can't remember the plus number, but it has to be postmarked by Election Day and then received by a certain number of days after Election Day. But however it's done, the fact that Trump is slowing down the mail so people can't vote against him, that is pretty damn nefarious. And so at least kudos to Chris Wallace for asking the question, though I think he doesn't really get an answer and moves on after not getting an answer. Though sometimes I think instead of giving all these, in my notes, instead of saying all the things I should criticize about the clip, I should just give like a sort of humorous title to the clip. And I did that for this clip. You could let me know if you like this way of introducing the clip better. This clip is called Chris Wallace Goes Postal on Jason Miller. I don't know if anyone remembers how postal workers used to go crazy and shoot people back like 20 years ago, before it was more like the school shootings. But this is Chris Wallace Goes Postal on Jason Miller. Over here.
Governors need to step up.
I got to ask you one final question. You talk about the infrastructure, the system not being able to handle it and being overwhelmed. The Postmaster General of the United States, who is a big Republican contributor and a former Trump fundraiser, has just instituted some sizable changes at the U.S. Postal Service. Let's put them up on the screen. Prohibit overtime pay, shut down sorting machines early, require letter carriers to leave mail behind, and the result is that there is a delay in mail being delivered. Question, isn't the Postmaster General increasing the chances that the Postal Service will be overwhelmed, that the very infrastructure that you talk about it being overwhelmed will be overwhelmed coming up to the election?
No, Chris, not at all. And in fact, I think you're confusing a couple of different arguments here. The fact of the matter is that we saw from Andrew Cuomo, the governor of New York, who wanted to have the prepaid postage envelopes for ballots. Well, guess what? Normally, the Post Service doesn't go and
No, wait a minute. Now, Jason, we're talking about the Postmaster General, Mr. DeJoy, and we're talking about cost-cutting reforms that he instituted in July.
Chris,
I'm not mixing up anything.
Postal
If you want to answer my question, but please don't go into
the Postal Service has been a disaster
what Andrew Cuomo is doing. Answer my question.
I am answering your question. The Postal Service has been a disaster for decades. I'm glad that we're getting some financial accountability and trying to get the thing right-sized. But to go and try to put it off on that, it's the state governors trying to change the rules 90 days before an election that's going to lead to millions of Americans being disenfranchised. That's the issue, Chris. You can't go and change it away.
Jason, thank you. Thanks for talking with us. Always interesting to talk to you. Up next, we'll bring in our...
I guess he ran out of time because he never really got the answer. That, at one point he got all frustrated and said, don't give me your campaign talking points, give me an answer. But did he really get an answer? So he cross-examined him. He sort of acted like a journalist, but in the end, did he really get us an answer about why Trump is slowing down the postal system? Why, he said it was like economic efficiency, but Republicans have hated the post office for a long time, and they put in these requirements that I think it's like they have to have like 75 years of retirement benefits on hand, and so they have to like fund themselves based on like ongoing stamp sales. And I read a lot of stuff about how the mail is already slowing down. I don't know. I sent out some Patreon rewards and PayPal rewards. At a link down in the video description, you can become a monthly patron. At the $5 level, you get this weatherproof vinyl sticker I send you, and at $10 level, you get the sticker and this ACLU Constitution. I sent out like 6 or 7 of those at the beginning of, or in mid-July, because I was waiting for these new ACLU Constitutions, and I saw one made it all the way to the Netherlands. I sent one to Canada. I sent like 4 or 5 around the United States. Hopefully the postal system didn't destroy them because they were LiberalViewer mail, but I don't have return receipts or tracking on them, so I don't know for sure. And I've heard a lot of things online about the people who ship regularly and things aren't coming through. I've ordered some stuff from Amazon that's been delayed, even though that never happens. So anyway, you can let me know down in the comments section if you think there's been a slowdown in the U.S. Postal Service, and if it's a conspiracy to hurt mail-in ballots against Trump in November 2020. But this next clip is the final clip on the topic of Trump's dangerous lies. This is on James Clyburn, a member of Congress who helped Joe Biden become the nominee of the Democratic Party by endorsing him before the South Carolina primary, because he has a lot of power in South Carolina, talking about how Trump is kind of like Hitler and Mussolini, how we have to worry about him in those terms. He might not leave. I thought that was kind of an explosive allegation I would share with you and then talk about with you after we watch that final clip on the topic of Trump's dangerous lies, before I get to the ACLU fight topic with one clip at the end. But this is from CNN State of the Union, Dana Carvey talking to James Clyburn in this clip.
I want to ask you about something you said on Friday night in an interview with PBS. You said that you don't think President Trump would be willing to give up his office, and that, quote, he thinks that the American people will be duped by him like the people of Germany were duped by Adolf Hitler. Do you really think Donald Trump is comparable to Adolf Hitler?
What I said starting about 2.5, maybe 3 years ago after one of his State of the Unions, that I feel very strongly that this man has taken on strong arm tactics. And I feel very strongly that he is Mussolini, Putin is Hitler. I said that back then, and I believe that. I believe very strongly that this guy never had any idea about being one to peacefully transfer power. I don't think he plans to leave the White House. He doesn't plan to have fair and unfettered elections. I believe that he plans to install himself in some kind of emergency way to continue to hold on to office. And that's why the American people had better wake up. I know a little bit about history, and I know how countries find their demise. It is when we fail to let democracy, at the fundamentals of which is a fair, unfettered election. And that's why he's trying to put a cloud over this election, floating the idea of postponing the elections. He does not, and I saw what Steve Miller within the last few hours. That is some of the worst stuff I've ever heard in my life. This is not a perfect democracy, but it's better than any other that it exists. And I really feel that the fundamentals are being frayed, and if we are not careful, this country will be lost for our next generation, our children and our grandchildren.
Mr. Clyburn, before I let you go, as you know, the former vice.
Oh, and there, Dana Bash asks James Clyburn about the vice presidential pick that Biden has to make. At a link down in the video description, you can see all of CNN's State of the Union. And somehow I think that might be my topic, or a bigger topic next week, because I think in the next week that's going to happen. But did I hear right? Did he say Hitler, Putin, Mussolini all in the same sentence? Was Putin in between Hitler and Mussolini? I thought I heard that, but I'm not sure. You can let me know what you think down in the comment section. And that's the last clip in the Trump's Dangerous Lies section. But in terms of the fight against Trump's dangerous lies and the fight against creeping authoritarianism, that's my final topic here. The second topic, the ACLU fight I talked about. And like I said before, there's this new movie that I watched streaming called The Fight that not only recapitulates some of the low points of the Trump administration by profiling some great ACLU lawyers fighting against Trump injustice, but the movie also shows this real human drama in a way that makes it, I thought, really watchable. And tomorrow I'm going to have my own discussion with a local ACLU lawyer that I'm premiering as a 22-minute YouTube video. It's actually 22 minutes, 49 seconds, so closer to 23 minutes, and there's a link to that premiere down in the video description. But this is Bill Maher's discussion with Kerry Washington, who was a producer of that movie about the ACLU lawyers, The Fight, and she talks about how it was kind of a recapitulation of the fight against the worst low points of the Trump administration. And I'll talk about that a little more after we watch that final news clip together. This is from HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher last Friday, and the entire Kerry Washington interview is available on the Real Time YouTube channel at a link down in the video description. And I'll talk about this clip a little more with you after we watch together over here.
Okay, she is the Emmy-nominated actor who produced the ACLU documentary The Fight, which you can see in select cinemas on video and on demand starting Friday, July 31st. That's tonight for those watching tonight. Kerry Washington. Kerry, thank you so much for doing this. My first question to you is, did you feel the earthquake today? And I don't mean the thing that got me out of bed. I mean that Trump said, he tweeted that he wants to delay the election. You're a thought leader in this country now. What is your reaction to that?
Not to jump right into the film, but I do have to jump right into the film because one of the things that happened for me, I've always had such a great deal of respect for the ACLU and have always, had a really good working relationship with them. But what I came to realize is every single thing that we are worried about right now, LGBTQ rights, women's right to choose, police brutality on Black bodies, immigrants' rights, voting rights. When you read something horrible happening in the paper, you can be guaranteed that the ACLU is on it. They are at the forefront of this fight of battling the attack on civil rights and civil liberties. So my first response, honestly, when I read it was like, oh, I bet that Dale Ho, who runs the voting rights division of the ACLU, is going to drop out of some of our interviews for the movie today because he has work to do. And I'm grateful that he's on the ground doing that work.
Right. Well, they sure need defending the ACLU because they also defend people who are abhorrent. And I think a lot of times on the left, we forget about free speech in the interest of not being offended. And I think it's great that someone like you gets out there and says, yes, the ACLU is our friend, even though they defended the Nazis in Skokie. They defended people at Charlottesville. They defended the Westboro Baptist Church. I mean, they walk the walk.
They really do. I try to remind people that there hasn't ever been a president since the inception of the ACLU 100 years ago. There's never been a president who hasn't been sued. They've sued every president, Republican or Democrat, because they really are invested in the rights of all people. But I'm very proud of how we deal with the whole Charlottesville situation in the film. We really, we ask them about it. We are invited into their introspection, and they're doing a lot of conversations within the organization right now around where they stand and making sure that they're also factoring in access to power when they choose their clients. They believe in free speech, but when they decide which clients they will work with, they're having really complicated, nuanced conversations about that. And we were able to capture some of that for the film, which I'm really proud of.
Yeah, well, you should be. It's a great film, and I hope everybody gets a chance to see it in some platform, and we have lots of time to do that. So you should see that,
That's right.
that movie.
And like I said, there's a link down in the video description to the website for the Fight film, where you can click on 6, 7, 8 different platforms that are streaming the movie, and I think it's like $12.99, $13.99, I bought it for $14.99. So I may have overspent a couple dollars, but it's definitely worth watching. And the only criticism I have of Bill Maher there is he's always like focused on, yes, ACLU supports offensive speech. I'm someone who says things that are offensive, politically incorrect, real time, whatever. And of course, that's Bill Maher's focus when he talks about the ACLU. But the ACLU, like Kerry Washington was saying, when it comes to ACLU support of the protesters in Charlottesville and Nazis, they're also considering the way that their support for free speech affects people who are powerful, white supremacy. When you support speakers who are white supremacist in an era when the Trump presidency is also white supremacist, that's a problem. And anyway, that you'll see that discussed in the movie. But like I said, I'm also having my local discussion with an ACLU lawyer that was part of my local ACLU chapter meeting last Thursday that I'm premiering as a video tomorrow, 1 p.m. Pacific time. It's already recorded, so I'll just be in the comment section watching it with you if you want to watch that with me. And anyway, that's the last newsmaker clip. I do have the bonus Dash and Sandy clip, the dandy clip that some people like to call it. This is from the food bowl at like 6:30 this morning. There's a lot of Dash Muse here, and you'll see both Dash and Sandy in the final clip, the Dash and Sandy dandy clip before I finish the show tonight over here. And that's the dandy clip. I do have to confess that I did kind of kick Sandy in the butt during part of that video to get Sandy to move more into the picture. But even though I lightly kicked her in the butt, I would say no animals were harmed in the making of that video, as they always say in all the movies that people watch. Anyway, that's the end of the live stream. That's all my newsmaker clips, all my news summaries, my dandy clip at the end. I will be joining you in the comment section tomorrow to watch this video that I'm premiering that actually already happened last Thursday in my ACLU Sacramento chapter meeting, but I'm premiering it as a recorded video tomorrow that we can watch together. And until then, or until hopefully I'll be back next week and every week for the foreseeable future doing my live streams. But anyway, that's the end of the show, and until tomorrow and next Sunday, I guess I will be seeing all of you around the internet.